November 2024, an elderly man walked into the offices of Le Monde newspaper in Paris carrying a battered leather briefcase. He told the receptionist he had information about Princess Diana's death and would only speak to the senior investigative reporter. The receptionist almost dismissed him as another conspiracy theorist, but something about his urgent desperation made her call upstairs. Senior reporter Claudette Moreau came down expecting to quickly dismiss another crank, but when the old man opened his briefcase and pulled out a photograph, her breath caught. The photo showed Princess Diana sitting in what appeared to be a small apartment. She was alive, conscious, bandaged, but clearly not in a hospital. The timestamp on the photo read September 2nd, 1997, 3 days after Diana's official death. The man introduced himself as Dmitry Volkov. He said he was 78 years old, a former KGB officer who had been stationed in Paris in the 1990s working under diplomatic cover. He claimed he had been following Diana that night in August 1997 not to harm her but to protect her. His orders from Moscow had been clear: monitor Diana Spencer and extract her if her life was in immediate danger. Claudette studied the photograph. It could be doctored, but something about it felt authentic. Diana's face showed the right level of trauma. Her injuries were consistent with a car crash. The setting looked genuinely like a 1990s safe house. Claudette asked Dmitry if he had any other evidence, and he pulled out a thick folder containing documents in Russian medical reports and more photographs. Dmitry explained in heavily accented French that he had been watching Diana for months before Paris. Moscow had intelligence suggesting British establishment wanted Diana eliminated. She knew too much about royal corruption, about arms deals, about scandals that threatened the monarchy. Dmitry's mission was to shadow Diana, and if assassination attempt occurred, he was authorized to intervene and extract her to safety. On the night of August 30th, 1997, Dmitry had been following Diana's Mercedes through Paris. He was on a motorcycle 3 cars behind. He saw the paparazzi chase, saw the Mercedes speed up, saw it enter the Pont de l'Alma tunnel. He saw the crash, heard the terrible sound of impact. He was one of the first people to reach the wreckage. Dmitry said he found Diana alive in the back seat. She was badly injured, bleeding, losing consciousness. Dodi was already dead, Henri Paul was dead, Trevor Rees-Jones was unconscious. Dmitry made a split-second decision. He radioed for his backup team, told them to bring the medical van immediately. Within 4 minutes, a fake ambulance arrived at the tunnel. While Good Samaritans and paparazzi were focused on the front of the Mercedes, Dmitry and his team extracted Diana through the back door. They had a body double, a woman who looked similar enough in the chaos and darkness to pass for Diana. They placed the double in Diana's position and took the real Diana to their vehicle. The switch took less than 90 seconds. Claudette interrupted. "You expect me to believe you substituted another woman's body for Diana and nobody noticed?" Dmitry nodded calmly and said in the chaos of the crash scene, with poor lighting and confusion, it was possible. The body double was already dying from cancer. She had volunteered for this mission knowing she had weeks to live. She died in the ambulance on the way to the hospital and was identified as Princess Diana. The real Diana was taken to a Russian safe house in the 15th arrondissement. Dmitry said they had a doctor waiting who had been briefed on possible injuries. Diana was stabilized, treated, kept sedated for 3 days while her injuries healed enough for transport. The plan was to move her to Moscow once she was stable enough to travel. But something went wrong. Dmitry said on September 3rd Diana regained full consciousness and realized what had happened. She was furious, demanded to be returned to her sons. She tried to leave the safe house, and in the struggle she fell, hitting her head. Her injuries, which had been healing, suddenly worsened. She began bleeding internally. Despite the doctor's efforts, Diana died on September 4th, 1997, 5 days after the crash in a Russian safe house in Paris. Claudette stared at Dmitry, trying to assess if he was delusional or telling an impossible truth. Why come forward now after 27 years? Dmitry said he was dying of cancer, had months to live. He had carried this secret for nearly 3 decades and wanted the truth known before he died. He had proof and was willing to provide everything if Le Monde would publish his story. The proof was substantial. Dmitry had medical records in Russian detailing Diana's treatment, photographs showing Diana at different stages of her 5-day survival, audio recordings of Diana speaking weekly, asking about William and Harry, documents showing the body double's identity and consent forms, and most damning, a photograph of Diana's actual burial in a cemetery outside Moscow. Claudette knew this story, if true, was the biggest scandal in modern history. If false, it would destroy Le Monde's credibility. She needed verification. She told Dmitry she would investigate his claims, and if they checked out, the story would be published. Dmitry agreed and provided contact information for his Moscow handler who could corroborate parts of the story. Over the next 3 weeks, Claudette worked with forensic experts to authenticate Dmitry's evidence. The photographs were examined for digital manipulation and dated using techniques that analyzed film grain and chemical composition. Experts concluded the photos appeared genuine, taken between September 1st and 4th, 1997. The medical records used terminology and procedures consistent with 1990s Russian military medicine. The audio recordings were analyzed by voice recognition specialists. They compared the voice in the recordings to verified Diana audio samples. The analysis showed a 92% match, high enough to suggest it was likely Diana but not definitive proof. The voice sounded weak, traumatized, speaking in short phrases consistent with someone recovering from serious injuries. Most shocking was tracing the body double. Dmitry identified her as Svetlana Romanova, a 58-year-old former Soviet intelligence officer who had terminal pancreatic cancer in August 1997. Medical records showed she died on August 31, 1997 in Paris. Her body had been cremated quickly with minimal documentation. Could she have been the woman identified as Diana at the hospital? Claudette tracked down Svetlana's daughter, now living in Estonia. The daughter confirmed her mother had disappeared in August 1997 on what she was told was a final assignment. The daughter received notice weeks later that her mother had died in Paris. She never got the body, just ashes. She had always suspected something strange about the circumstances but had been too afraid to investigate. The daughter provided photographs of her mother. There was indeed a resemblance to Diana, especially in coloring and build. In a chaotic crash scene with traumatic injuries, the two women could potentially be confused. The daughter said her mother had been deeply loyal to the Soviet Union and later Russia and might have volunteered for a mission even knowing it would cost her life. December 2024, Claudette convinced Le Monde to send her to Moscow to investigate the most explosive claim that Diana was buried in a cemetery outside the city. Dmitry had provided coordinates and a grave location. Claudette traveled with a photographer and hired a local guide who could navigate Russian bureaucracy. The cemetery was in a small town called Khimki, about 20 kilometers from Moscow. It was old, run down, with many unmarked graves from the Soviet era. Dmitry's coordinates led to a section with simple headstones, mostly for people who died in the 1990s. The specific grave he indicated had a small marker that read simply SR 1961 to 1997. Claudette photographed the grave. The dates matched Diana's birth and death years, though Diana was actually born in 1961 and died in 1997. SR could stand for Spencer Romanova or any number of names. The grave was well maintained with fresh flowers, suggesting someone visited regularly, but there was no indication this was anything other than an ordinary Russian burial. Claudette needed proof. She contacted the cemetery administration requesting information about the grave's occupant. Officials were unhelpful, claiming records from that era were incomplete. She tried to obtain a court order for exhumation, but Russian courts moved slowly and were unlikely to approve disturbing a grave based on a foreign journalist's conspiracy theory. Then Claudette got lucky. A cemetery groundskeeper who had worked there since 1996 remembered something unusual. In September 1997, a burial had occurred late at night with no funeral service. Men in expensive suits had arrived with a coffin, insisted on immediate burial despite regulations requiring paperwork. They paid substantial cash and the cemetery director allowed it, no questions asked. The groundskeeper said he had been told to dig the grave in a specific location and mark it simply with SR. He remembered thinking it was strange that such wealthy-looking men would bury someone in this ordinary cemetery with such a simple marker. He assumed it was a mistress or illegitimate child, someone they wanted hidden but not completely erased. The groundskeeper agreed to help Claudette for a price. He said if she came back at night he could show her something. When Claudette returned after dark, the groundskeeper took her to a small maintenance shed. Inside, he pulled out a plastic bag containing items he had secretly taken from the coffin before it was closed. The items were a small jewelry box containing a ring, a bracelet with the letter D, and a photograph of two young boys. Claudette's hands shook as she examined them. The ring was simple gold with an inscription inside that read, "To the best mother W and H, William and Harry's names." This couldn't be coincidence. The photograph showed William and Harry as young children. It was worn as if it had been carried in someone's wallet or pocket for years. On the back was written in English, "My darling boys, I love you always." Claudette recognized Diana's handwriting from authenticated samples she had studied. These items proved someone connected to Diana was buried in this grave. Whether it was actually Diana or someone who had belonged to Diana, the jewelry and photograph were genuine Diana possessions. Claudette paid the groundskeeper handsomely and promised to protect his identity. She returned to Paris with the evidence. Le Monde published the story in January 2025. The headline read, "Did Princess Diana survive the Paris crash? Russian defector claims 5-day cover-up." The article presented all of Dmitri's evidence: the photographs, the medical records, the audio, the cemetery discovery. It was carefully written, acknowledging this was one man's testimony but noting the substantial corroborating evidence. Global reaction was explosive. British tabloids ran sensational headlines: "Diana alive for 5 days after crash." American networks did hour-long specials examining every claim. Russian media initially denied everything, then fell silent when government officials refused to comment. The story dominated news cycles for weeks. The British government issued a statement calling the claims absurd and hurtful to Diana's memory. They said multiple investigations had confirmed Diana died on August 31, 1997 in Paris, and any suggestion otherwise was disrespectful conspiracy mongering. They refused to address specific evidence, saying it didn't warrant response. But many people were convinced. The evidence was too substantial to dismiss. Dmitri's story explained mysteries about that night: why the ambulance took so long to reach the hospital, why Diana's injuries seemed survivable, why her body had been embalmed so quickly before family could object. If Dmitri was right, the official story was a complete lie. Prince William issued a statement through his lawyers demanding Le Monde retract the story and apologize. William said his mother died in 1997 and these claims caused his family tremendous pain. He said he would pursue legal action if the newspaper didn't retract. But Le Monde stood by their reporting, saying they had verified everything possible and presented it accurately. Prince Harry responded differently. He gave an interview saying he didn't know what to believe but wanted all evidence examined objectively. Harry said if there was any possibility his mother had survived even briefly, his family deserved to know the truth. He called for independent investigation, not immediate dismissal. Witnesses made the story more credible. Either there was an elaborate coordinated hoax or something like what Dmitri described had really happened. DNA testing became the focus. If investigators could obtain DNA from the Kimchi grave, they could compare it to Diana's verified DNA from her sons or from personal items she had touched. Definitive proof was possible if only Russian authorities would permit exhumation. Mohammed Al-Fayed, the father of Dodi who died in the crash, became involved. He had spent years claiming Diana was murdered and now believed Dmitri's story supported his conspiracy theories. Al-Fayed used his wealth and connections to pressure Russian officials. He offered millions of dollars to charity if they would allow exhumation. The offer worked. In April 2025, Russian authorities agreed to limited exhumation under strict conditions. Only a small bone sample would be taken. Testing would be done by independent labs approved by both Russia and Britain. Results would be released simultaneously to prevent either side from manipulating data. The exhumation was scheduled for May 2025. The world watched as investigators carefully excavated the Kimchi grave. Cameras were not allowed, but reports filtered out. The grave did contain a coffin and human remains consistent with someone who died in the 1990s. Bone samples were extracted and sent to 3 separate DNA laboratories. The wait for results was excruciating. It took 6 weeks for all 3 labs to complete their analysis. During that time, speculation ran wild. Betting markets opened on whether the grave would prove to be Diana's. News networks prepared special coverage for either outcome. William and Harry waited in private, dreading what the results might reveal. June 15, 2025, the DNA results were released simultaneously by all 3 laboratories. They were consistent across all tests. The remains in the Kimchi grave belonged to Svetlana Romanova, the Russian intelligence officer, not to Princess Diana. DNA comparison to Diana's verified samples showed no match. The grave did not contain Princess Diana. Dmitri's story collapsed. If Diana wasn't buried in Kimchi, then either she died in Paris as officially recorded, or she was buried somewhere else, or Dmitri had lied about everything. Investigators confronted Dmitri, who insisted the grave had been switched. He claimed Russian authorities must have moved Diana's body before the exhumation and substituted Svetlana's remains. But this claim was difficult to sustain. Would Russian officials really go to such lengths to hide a 27-year-old secret? Would they have the foresight to prepare for eventual exhumation by having substitute remains available? It seemed more likely that Svetlana had been buried there all along and Dmitri's story was fabrication. Yet mysteries remained. How had Diana's jewelry ended up in Svetlana's grave? The ring and bracelet with Diana's initials, the photograph of William and Harry. These items were authenticated as genuinely belonging to Diana. Russian officials claimed they must have been planted by Dmitry or his associates to make the grave seem credible. But the cemetery groundskeeper insisted he had taken those items from the coffin in 1997, long before Dmitry came forward. Was he lying for money, or had someone really buried Diana's personal items with Svetlana's body, and if so, why? One theory was that items belonging to Diana had been buried symbolically to honor the mission even though Diana's body was elsewhere. Dr. Petrov maintained his testimony. He insisted he had treated a severely injured woman in September 1997 who looked like Diana and died in his care. DNA results from a different grave didn't change what he had witnessed. Either he was part of an elaborate lie, or he had treated someone who wasn't Diana but resembled her, or he was telling truth and Diana's body was somewhere else. The photographs Dmitry provided remained unexplained. Forensic analysis confirmed they were taken in 1997 and showed a woman who looked like Diana. Skeptics argued the woman was just someone who resembled Diana photographed to create false evidence, but the resemblance was remarkable and the timing was exact. Audio recordings were similarly problematic. Voice analysis suggested the speaker was likely Diana but not with complete certainty. Was this Diana speaking weakly while recovering from injuries, or was it someone who sounded similar, or was it manipulated audio designed to deceive? Experts couldn't provide definitive answers. Le Monde faced criticism for publishing Dmitry's story without sufficient verification. Critics argued the newspaper had been irresponsible, giving platform to conspiracy theories that caused pain to Diana's family. Le Monde defended their reporting, saying they had verified everything possible and presented it accurately as one man's claims supported by some evidence. Dmitry disappeared after the DNA results were released. He stopped responding to messages, and his Moscow contacts said they hadn't seen him. Some speculated he fled knowing he would face consequences for the hoax. Others worried he had been silenced by Russian authorities, angry he had drawn attention to intelligence operations. Prince William issued a statement expressing relief that the exhumation had disproven the conspiracy theory. He asked people to respect his mother's memory and let her rest in peace at Althorpe, where she was actually buried. He said his family had endured tremendous pain from these false claims and hoped it would finally end. Prince Harry was more conflicted. He said he was glad the DNA test was negative but troubled by unanswered questions. What explained the photographs, the jewelry, the witness testimonies? Harry said perhaps the full truth would never be known, but he remained open to evidence if it ever emerged. Mohammed Al-Fayed refused to accept the results. He claimed the DNA test was rigged, that Russian and British authorities had colluded to hide the truth. He continued funding investigations trying to find where Diana was really buried. He remained convinced Diana had been murdered and Dmitry's story was closer to truth than official accounts. Dmitry resurfaced in July 2025, giving one final interview. He insisted his story was true but admitted he might have been mistaken about where Diana was buried. He said the grave in Khimki was where he was told Diana would be interred, but perhaps she was moved later. He maintained that Diana survived the crash for 5 days and died in Russian care. Without proof, Dmitry's claims faded from headlines. Most people concluded he had fabricated the story either for attention or as disinformation. The mystery of the jewelry and photographs was never fully resolved but was attributed to elaborate hoax. Diana's death was reconfirmed as occurring on August 31, 1997 in Paris. Yet some questions lingered. Why had Russian intelligence been following Diana that night? What was Operation Zalushka that the anonymous officer mentioned? Why had Svetlana Romanova's burial been so secretive and irregular? These threads suggested something unusual had happened, even if not exactly what Dmitry described. Historians noted that Dmitry's story, even if false, revealed real fears about Diana's safety. The fact that multiple intelligence services were monitoring her, that assassination was considered plausible, that extraction plans might have existed. These were reminders that Diana lived under surveillance and threat whether or not she was actually killed. Diana's grave at Althorpe remained her official resting place. No evidence ever emerged suggesting she was buried anywhere else. The conspiracy theory had been disproven, but it had also raised uncomfortable questions about the night she died and the forces that had wanted her silenced. In September 2025, Dmitry died of cancer in Moscow. His obituary in Russian newspapers mentioned his intelligence career but not his Diana claims. He died insisting he had told the truth and history would eventually prove him right. Whether he was a liar or a truth teller, nobody could say with certainty. The photograph he provided that initially shocked the world remained in Le Monde's archives. It showed a woman who looked like Diana in what appeared to be a safe house in 1997. Maybe it was an elaborate fake, maybe it was someone else, maybe against all evidence it really was Diana. The photograph was haunting because it showed possibility, the tantalizing maybe that could never be fully resolved. And so Diana's death remained officially as recorded, August 31st, 1997 in Paris after a car crash. But Dimitri's story had planted seeds of doubt that would grow in conspiracy circles for generations. Had Princess Diana really survived for 5 days after the crash? Did she die in Russian hands trying to escape back to her sons? Or was it all fiction designed to muddy truth? The answer depended on what you chose to believe, on whether you trusted official stories or suspected them, on whether you thought governments protected people or protected themselves. Diana's life had been full of secrets and lies and cover-ups, so why should her death be any different?